In my presentation, I'll be talking about Cyclospora, of course. I will talk about the outbreak that just occurred this past summer throughout the months of, I believe, July and August. And I will talk about preventing future outbreaks and what people have learned from this outbreak. Here I've posted a picture of Cyclospora cayetanensis. I apologize. So what is Cyclospora? Cyclospora cayetanensis is a parasite composed of one cell, too small to be seen without a microscope. This parasite causes an intestinal infection called cyclosporiasis. This is a definition I took from the CDC's website. That's a good source of a lot of the information, the biology, and a lot of the background on Cyclospora. So cyclosporiasis, or cyclospora infection, people are usually infected by this through digesting food or water. It is a little difficult for this to be passed through stool or any other kind of process. Symptoms. Cyclospora infects the small intestine or the bowel, causing watery diarrhea, frequent explosive bowel movements, loss of appetite, stomach pain, nausea, and flu-like symptoms. So here I've posted a picture of a healthy person and a person after being infected with Cyclospora. It is definitely food or water transmitted, and from the cases that I've reviewed, it has been mostly through leafy foods or greens, but it can be transmitted numerous ways. It's not limited to just those options, as my pictures show. So what happened this summer? I've posted a map of the infected states. Cyclospora somehow spread from the Midwestern states, but particularly Texas. It particularly started in Texas and spread northward, and then out east. But in all, it affected it infected half. This is a summary by the CDC of the outbreak. On June 28, 2013, the CDC was notified of 2 laboratory-confirmed cases of Cyclospora infection in Iowa residents who had become ill in June and did not have a history of international travel during the 14 days before the onset of illness. Since that date, CDC has been collaborating with public health officials in multiple states and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to investigate an outbreak of cyclosporiasis. Here are the epidemiological stats from that outbreak. There were 631 official cases of Cyclospora infection. The outbreak spread to 25 states, so that's half the states. And unfortunately, there were 0 confirmed deaths from this outbreak. 49 people were hospitalized, which was 8% of the cases. The age of the sick ranged from 1-year-olds to 94 years old. So it did not, as shown here, did not affect a particular age group. And while it was not deadly, it did cause multiple hospitalizations and needed to be investigated by our regulatory agencies, the CDC and the FDA. What was concluded from this investigation was that there were 2 separate outbreaks. The illnesses were not caused by one source, but 2 separate sources from 2 separate locations, but somehow, or coincidentally, one might say, occurred in the same time span. One outbreak was centered around Taylor Farms in Mexico. The source here was pointed to be from a salad mix. The CDC and the Food and Drug Administration and state health officials from Iowa, Nebraska, Texas, and other states collaborated to conduct epidemiological investigations and tracebacks. The tracebacks linked them to a salad mix supplied by Taylor Farms de Mexico, which provides salad mix to Olive Garden and Red Lobster, who are both owned by Darden Restaurants. So this link is how the salad mix managed to spread to multiple states across the United States. The Olive Garden and Red Lobster are of course very popular food venues here, and with these two locations being supplied by the same salad mix and being owned by the same people, the spread was quick and I guess efficient in this case. On August 12th through the 19th of 2013, the FDA conducted an environmental assessment in conjunction with the Mexican government in Guanajuato, Mexico, where the Taylor Farms processing facility is located. So no food safety protocols were violated, is what they found, and the environmental assessment team came up with several suggestions for the company. So all in all, the safety protocols that Taylor Farms had on these processing facilities in Mexico were following food safety standards, and in this case no faults were given out by this environmental assessment team, but there were things that could be improved upon that were found by the team so as to prevent further spread of this pathogen. The environmental assessment team recommended that processed plant workers that had been sick with diarrhea or any other food-related illness in the weeks around the outbreak were encouraged to submit stool samples to test for whether the pathogen was associated with the Guanajuato region. Another recommendation was that the hand-washing faucets be changed or at least looked at, as they created a potential for cross-examination with employees having to handle them. While these were two of several recommendations by the assessment team, the environmental assessment team, these seem to be the more highlighted recommendations. The environmental assessment team did want to examine, not by force, but hopefully through volunteer workers, to check on whether Cyclospora in this case was endemic to that region of Mexico, and whether whether other precautions could be made to prevent the spread of this kind of Cyclospora to their foods and to locations across the United States. As in terms of the hand washing recommendation for the faucets, this was probably a typical recommendation made by environmental assessment teams, but in this case they did want Taylor Farms to take a closer look at the sanitation in their restrooms to make sure that there were no scenarios or increased chances of cross-contamination based on the way the restroom was set up, and whether automated facilities could be looked at as a possible change, such as no-touch towel dispensers or faucets that did not require being touched by. The second outbreak that was, or the second source of the Cyclospora outbreak that's this summer, was fresh cilantro. This outbreak was of a much smaller scale and was isolated to residents in Texas. The source in that situation was determined to be from Puebla, Mexico. So how do we prevent Cyclospora? I've got two pictures here. The best way to prevent this pathogen is to wash your hands, your utensils, and wash the surfaces, whether they be cutting boards or your counter, where food is being kept or stored, with hot, soapy water before and after handling food. This is important to killing off any bacteria before and after. Fresh produce should be thoroughly washed before it's eaten. Produce often from before they reach the grocery store may have pesticides, and these pesticides may not react well to bacteria or pathogens, and each nation may have different pesticide material or regulations that are used to check these pesticides, and to reduce the risk and the chance of being contaminated or eating foods that may be contaminated. It is best practice to thoroughly wash these products. The sources I used for this presentation were mainly from the FDA and the CDC. The Food and Drug Administration does an amazing job of collaborating with their CDC partners to investigate outbreaks as soon as there's a possibility, or as soon as it is determined that it is possible that an outbreak is occurring. These two federal agencies send teams to locations and make investigations, do thorough investigations before sending these teams, of course, out to locations, and they do a good job of limiting these outbreaks. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation on Cyclospora and the outcomes and the dangers of this foodborne illness. Thank you.